We're going to quietly encourage you to keep your mouth shut. We're going to quietly encourage you to not speak out about your concerns about this. And they have figured out, just like you said, that people's desire to be accepted, people's desire not to harm people around them, their family, their friends, can then be used as a weaponized vulnerability to get people who otherwise would know better and would speak out and would resist to keep their mouths shut.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 13th through August 19th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have this widely followed returning guest. Alex Newman, a journalist and author and speaker, is a contributor at Epoch Times. He's also associated with the New American and the American Sentinel. Thank you very much, Alex, for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Dunnigan.
We've visited with you many times in the past about encroachments on our God-given rights by authorities, and this is a time of special concern about freedom of speech being taken over once again. We've been through this before. We've seen it obviously during censorship of the World War II. We've seen it in the Soviet Russian era. We've seen it in the COVID lockdown era, where there were people deplatformed, people told they couldn't say certain things. We're still under some of those restrictions here, but this is we're coming back with a vengeance now. We're seeing across the globe, and we wanted to get your international perspective on this as you study the developments like this globally. Most recently, coming out of the UK, threats against people of arrest and imprisonment if they say things that are deemed by the state to be critical of the state or critical of what they deem to be hate speech or false speech, etc. And even some cautions were being levied by the UK Minister of Information, etc. ahead of the recent interview on X by Donald Trump by Elon Musk, and saying that if they said anything that crossed the line, they would be in trouble. And we've had, I could go through example after example of recent contributors who we know of who are concerned now that if they say the wrong thing on X or online, that they could actually have a knock on the door and be arrested. It seems that the world hasn't learned lessons that we should have learned about censorship in the past. Can you bring us up to date on how grave the concern is? Are there real new developments and impending new lockdowns on our freedom of speech going forward? And well, we'll get to what we can do about it. But first of all, is this really ramping up as it seems to be on the online communities?
It absolutely is, Dunnigan. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this. So they've been preparing for this for many, many years. The UN brought together all the big tech companies, the governments. They've been plotting censorship at a global scale for many years. In fact, about a decade ago, they installed a member of the Chinese Communist Party, a card-carrying member of the CCP, at the helm of what's called the UN International Telecommunications Union. And one of the big items on his agenda was taking control of the internet. They wanted to tax the internet, and they wanted to censor the internet. When he was asked about the Communist Chinese dictatorship censorship, his name was Howlin Chow, he responded that, well, censorship's in the eye of the beholder. You know, we don't think what we're doing is censorship. So they have had a plan for a long time to crack down on the internet. We saw it really come to the fore in 2016 after the election there. Massive efforts to deplatform people, to rig the algorithm so that you couldn't find the truth, to bury information that they didn't like. And now with the latest examples, you just brought up two really, really important ones, the UK and the European Union, now trying to impose their censorship, not just on their own citizens, but even in the United States. You've got the British authorities threatening extradition against people in the United States who criticized this crazy behavior by this rogue government, who criticized the mass importation of illegal immigrants from the Middle East and Africa. You've got the European Union, the European Commission, I call it the European Soviet, one of their high commissioners, whatever, Thierry Breton, sending a letter on August 12th to Elon Musk, threatening him with more lawfare if he didn't take proper precautions to ensure that Trump didn't use hate speech or spread misinformation. And, of course, they view misinformation and hate speech as anything that contradicts their narrative. So if you want to know where this is going at a global level, they've already put it in all their documents. The UN is having the Summit of the Future coming up here in about a month, where they're planning to make the biggest global power grab on free speech that they have ever undertaken. They've outlined all of this in very clear terminology in the policy briefs of Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who, by the way, is a socialist leader. He used to be the head of the Socialist International, traces its lineage directly back to Karl Marx before taking over the top post at the United Abominations. You can also look at what's going on in Sweden. Sweden's like the petri dish where they take the bad ideas they want to impose on the West and put them on the rest of us. So in Sweden, for many, many years now, people have been prosecuted for what they say. They literally have thrown pastors in jail for speaking negatively about homosexuality or gender confusion. Pastor Åke Green was one of the famous cases, literally behind bars for criticizing homosexuality in a sermon in his church. And so back in 2008, the Swedish government, the Justice Ombudsman, did an investigation of the Bible to determine whether it ran afoul of Swedish hate speech laws. And they actually put their findings online. They've taken them down since then. My guess is they didn't want anybody drawing attention to them. But what they found is that the Bible is, in fact, a violation of Swedish hate speech laws, that it wouldn't be practical to ban it at the moment, but that if we would just change the words around, if we would remove certain parts, then maybe it wouldn't be a problem vis-a-vis Swedish law. So this is the direction they're moving. And before you think, well, that'll never happen in America, we have the First Amendment, it's already happening in America. These conversion therapy laws that they want you to think there are somehow people torturing homosexual children, total baloney. What this is actually a prohibition on the preaching of the gospel, right? Christians believe that Jesus Christ can not just save people, but radically transform them, that he can give them a new a heart of flesh, replacing their heart of stone, that they can become a new creation. If a pastor in many jurisdictions, state and local, across this country, were to say that to a child who is suffering from unwanted same-sex attraction, who is suffering from confusion about his or her gender, they could be prosecuted, in some cases jailed, for saying, no, Jesus can save you from all of that, because that would then fall under their definition of conversion therapy. So we're headed into a brave new world where you are not allowed to speak on a whole range of topics. YouTube has been a very clear example of this. You couldn't talk about elections. You couldn't talk about certain health policies. The CEO who vowed to remove anything that violated World Health Organization recommendations, Dr. Susan Wojcicki, just passed away at 56 years old. That was bizarre. But these policies remain firmly in place. And I'll say one more thing about this, Dunnigan, because I think people need to realize what's coming. The same people who war-gamed out the thing that we're not allowed to talk about that happened over several years, just met again in Rio de Janeiro under the auspices of CEPI. This is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. It's a project of the Bill Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, a number of governments, and the big pharmaceutical giants, especially the manufacturers of those products that we're not allowed to mention. And they all came together under Klaus Schwab's stakeholder model. So you remove the natural checks and balances where, regulators regulate the businesses, businesses push back on the regulators, the media as an independent outside observer criticizes everybody equally. They removed all those checks and balances, all those barriers, brought them all together under the stakeholder model, and they just did a massive war game summit in Rio called the Global Pandemic Preparedness Summit, where they prepared for the next one, Disease X, which numerous people there suggested was going to be bird flu, the avian influenza, H5N1, or monkeypox, they call it Mpox now, or both. In fact, as we're doing this right now, the World Health Organization has called an emergency meeting to determine whether they're going to declare a public health emergency of international concern, pronounced fake, and if they determine that there is a fake, then that means the WHO is going to usurp all these new powers again. We're going to see exactly the same kind of restrictions on speech that we saw the last time around, only more vigorously enforced by governments. And so, folks, watch out. They're coming at us from all angles, and they are determined to stop us from speaking freely about any of these issues.
Have you seen any examples of promising resistance and rejection of these mandates in advance by any jurisdictions, either states or countries, saying we will not comply with such restrictions on free speech if they should arise again in the future?
Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of that. I mean, after the last event that we're not supposed to talk about that lasted a few years, a number of states did pass really strong laws to protect against that. The state of Louisiana, for example, passed an excellent law saying that WHO decrees, recommendations, policy initiatives, whatever, were not going to be applicable in the state of Louisiana. Excellent, excellent piece of legislation. Every state with a brain ought to be passing similar laws. And of course, this would apply also to all the restrictions. And so what's happening now is really interesting because the Supreme Court basically, kind of danced around it, but they basically said, yeah, if the Biden regime wants to keep bullying big tech companies to silence everything that we don't want said, then we're just going to give that a pass. And their legal reasoning was absolutely preposterous. I read part of the decision. They really had to twist themselves into pretzels. But as of right now, most jurisdictions are going along with this. Now, the U.S. government doesn't officially say, hey, we're going to censor stuff, because that would obviously be a flagrant violation of the First Amendment. But they're more than happy to work behind the scenes with the Facebooks, the Twitters, the YouTubes, the Googles, et cetera, to bury anything that they don't want said. And we just saw recently another character, Dr. Peter Hotez, CNN's favorite quack. And this guy, at a conference in South America, just said that it's now time to deploy the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and NATO and the United Nations and their security agencies to combat what he calls the force of anti-vaccine misinformation and things like this. So he's calling now for the use of law enforcement and military authorities to combat speech that he doesn't like, because, of course, he's on the payroll making enormous amounts of money from the very companies that are affected by this speech that he doesn't like. So the alligators are all around us. And as far as I can tell, there are no really firm. I mean, there's been some little efforts. Florida passed a law that said the big tech companies couldn't discriminate against people based on their viewpoints and stuff. But so far, very little of this has been enforced. Very little of this is going to be enforced. And, it's very hard for the state of Florida or the state of Texas to impose its will on a company based in the People's Republic of California, especially when they're working with the White House.
One of the problems that we face as journalists and as people who are trying to get the speech out, as well as people who just want to express their opinions personally, individually, online, or do a search, do a online lookup search to try to find information on a topic, is that as you said, it's covert, it's opaque, it's cowardly and hidden. We had an attempt to see if we could do a promotion of one of our videos recently that happens to be during Independence Day week here in the U.S. And so one of my sons was wearing a tie and standing in front of a backdrop of an American flag while he was talking about the importance of free speech and protecting your liberties. And a company not to be named that is a primary platform for us said that we can't promote that because it's election advertising. We said there's nothing about elections in here. There's nothing about political candidates. No, they said, well, it violates our policies. And I said, please point out the time segments within that video where it violates your policies so that we can be more aware and be more sensitive to that in the future. They said, well, actually, we don't know because it's the algorithm. It's the algorithm that determines and it doesn't give us those exact pinpoints. So we can apply for a human review that might take a week to get it done, but we can try to guess what it is. So there are articles that come out every week here now in the Epoch Times talking about AI and how it's going to be the algorithm. It's going to be the algorithm that's going to make all these decisions. Is that the next wave here where it isn't even an individual? You always wonder, well, who was it that deplatformed Trump originally? That kind of thing. Who was the person that made that decision to pull the microphone away from the sitting president of the United States of America? But in the future, and not even the future, but even now, is it opaque enough that it's quote unquote not a person, not anyone we can point a finger at, but the algorithm, the AI programming that's going to make those decisions about what can be said and not said, and therefore there's no recourse against this because there's no one point of contact you can go to again and complain to.
Yeah, that's exactly where this is going, Dunnigan. In fact, they've been very clear about this. The U.S. government just teamed up with the mass murdering dictatorship in communist China to pass a massive AI resolution through the UN General Assembly. So they now have in what they like to call international law, which as far as I'm concerned is a giant fraud, but they now have enshrined in international law a resolution, a measure backed by the Biden regime and the CCP to use AI for all of these purposes and then some. Now, sometimes you kind of have to read between the lines to see what they're really talking about. They claim this is to preserve human rights. Well, a lot of the censorship is happening under the guise of human rights, right? And so when you read between the lines and you see what they're up to, that's exactly where this is going. And there's another component to it, too, where they have determined that it's much more effective and efficient to have people censor themselves than to have a iron-fisted government do it. And so the CCP has pioneered, and this needs to be thought of as the pilot project rather than the end, this system of social credit scores, where if you are a good serf, you don't ask a lot of questions, you believe whatever the government tells you, you don't rock the boat at all, you do what you're told, you get a good social credit score. And so you get lots of privileges. You can send your kids to a nice school, you can get a passport, you could travel, you can have a nice job. If you don't do those things, well, you have an escalating set of interventions up to and including being locked in a re-education camp and then executed. So these are very, very serious measures. And what that has the effect of doing is everybody learns to just be quiet. People may be thinking these things, but nobody dares express them because it doesn't just hurt them, right? It's going to hurt your children. It's going to hurt everybody that's connected to you through your social network. Oh, you got a bad score? That means all your friends on Fascist Book are going to then be suffering on their social credit score. So people need to realize that there are enormous resources. Some of the most intelligent minds in the world are now dedicated full time to figure out how do we silence people across a whole range of issues. And even if it's not your issue, you need to recognize this is going to have a profound impact on you. It's on health. It's on elections. It's kind of ironic. They say a lot of the censorship is to protect democracy. Oh, that's interesting. We protect democracy by silencing the very people who are supposed to be ruling in a democracy. Amazing how that works. So all these major institutions across all these major areas of speech on all these different platforms through all these different mechanisms are working to silence you and to control your access to information. And if that doesn't concern you, I think there's nothing we can do to help you at this point anymore.
One thing you touched just in passing that I want to really focus on is the playing on our natural psychology, our natural evolutionary or whatever God-given tendency to want to fit in with a group, to be connected, to be in relation with a group. And when there's threats to that, saying that if you step out of line, if you say the wrong thing, or even try to search the wrong thing, try to seek out information about the thing that the state doesn't want you to, that you will be shunned. You will be seen as a pariah. And you're going to be dragging down everybody who knows you. We saw this happen. This ugly specter emerged during the lockdowns and everything, where it was, there were factions that you were either for us or against us. And those who were causing, who weren't going along with experimental therapies and that sort of thing were being, told to the others that these people are your enemy. They're hurting elderly people. They're threatening the community. They're unsafe to the community. They're enemies of the people. And so you naturally just trigger what psychologist Jordan Peterson talks about is the natural tribal or in-group preference, where we always want to be along. We've instinctively over uncounted generations have learned that if we're isolated, we're vulnerable. And if we're connected to the group and to the community, we may survive. And that's been a very great survival skill for human communities. But now that's being used against us. Any comments on that before we talk about what we can do about it?
Yeah, and the people who are running these things, they understand human psychology. They understand human vulnerabilities like you can't imagine. They've been studying these things for well over a century. They have become masters at figuring out how to manipulate people. And so there are very prominent people, including from the Obama administration, people like Cass Sunstein now, who are working on the fringes of this, right, where we're not going to use outright force, right? We're not going to do what the British do, where we're going to send stormtroopers to your house to haul you off to jail for a post you made on Facebook that we didn't like, where you're going to get a 5-year sentence while child rapists get 100 hours of community service. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to nudge you. We're going to quietly encourage you to keep your mouth shut. We're going to quietly encourage you to not speak out about your concerns about this. And they have figured out just like you said, that people's desire to be accepted, people's desire not to harm people around them, their family, their friends, can then be used as a weaponized vulnerability to get people who otherwise would know better and would speak out and would resist to keep their mouths shut. So we're dealing here with very sophisticated megalomaniacs and criminals who have determined that they are going to take your freedom and they don't want you to complain about it while that's happening. And so, again, regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum, regardless about what you think on any one of these many issues that we're being told we can't talk freely about, you need to recognize that you are in the crosshairs just as much as everybody else is, regardless of what your individual opinion is on each individual issue. This is something that's going to affect everybody negatively, except maybe the megalomaniacs and criminals at the top of the food chain who think they're going to be taking your freedom and your money.
All right. So there's a big problem. It's getting bigger. It's getting more sophisticated. It's getting more pervasive. It's going to affect everything we're able to say, everything we're able to do as far as moving about, being able to communicate with each other, and even have money spend or not spend to be able to transact in the economy with your social credit scores can be curtailed. So you just simply become basically a person who's got your wings clipped to the point where you can't do anything. It's almost like imprisoning you right where you stand. What can we do about it? What are some basic 1, 2, 3 things that people must do now before it's too late?
Well, I would say it starts with the individual. First, you need to get yourself informed on this, and you need to be concrete in your resolve that we are not going to accept this. Period. End of story. We're not going to go along with this. We're not going to be silent as our freedoms are stripped away, as the future of our children is damaged and destroyed. We're just not going to take it. And so whatever means we have to use to speak out, we're going to speak out. If that means I have to print leaflets and go put them at car windshields in the parking lot, I'm going to do that. If it means we have to talk about it at church, if it means we have to call a town hall meeting, it doesn't matter. We're not going to accept this idea that we need to remain silent while our freedoms and our values are under attack. We cannot do that. Secondly, actually talk to people. Go out and communicate with your neighbors. Develop these networks now, because when the emergency comes, then it's too late. So go out and meet your neighbors, walk up and down your block, maybe take your neighbors some cookies, get to know them, introduce yourself, let them see that you're not a monster, regardless of what the clown car media says, and develop these relationships now while you still have the opportunity. Next, get involved in the political process. Get to know your city officials, your county officials, your state officials, even your federal officials. I can tell you from the last time around on the health side, made all the difference in the world what particular jurisdiction you were sitting in as the tyranny was imposed. Here where I sit, we never had one moment of mask mandate. In fact, when they passed the mandate that you had to get the thing if you wanted to have your job, well, our state legislature passed a better law that said if you fire somebody for not taking the thing, you're going to be fined 10 times as much as you would have paid the clown car over at OSHA. So these are all steps that states and local governments and counties can take. Work with your sheriff. There are hundreds of sheriffs across this country who are what's called constitutional sheriffs. If you don't have one, find one and replace that sheriff at the next possible opportunity. If you do have one, offer your assistance in anything necessary, up to and including being deputized in the event of an emergency, should the sheriff determine that his department doesn't have the resources necessary to keep order, to protect the rights of citizens from any threat, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all easy, concrete things that people can do. And last but not least, pray and get ready, because I think tough times are coming. The restrictions on your speech that we have seen over the last few years, I think, are going to go into overdrive if these trends are not stopped. And so you want to be preparing for those things and anticipating those things so that you're not caught by surprise, so you already have a good sense of what you're going to do if and when this stuff hits.
Another thing that you mentioned there, as far as like handing out leaflets, is in some of the publications that are still standing up for freedom of speech are putting out hard copy editions. Can you talk to us about a couple that you work with that people can get hard copy versions of?
Yeah, thank you. And I would encourage people to do that right now. So I serve as senior editor of the New American Magazine. We do put out a print magazine twice a month, exposing all the lies. And of course, Google can't censor this. YouTube can't censor this. Facebook can't censor this. None of them can censor this. Comes to your doorstep twice a month. I also write for the Epic Times. You can subscribe to the print edition of that, depending on where you live. If you live out in the middle of nowhere, it's a little bit harder, but you can get the print edition for that. And then you can get my free newsletter. It's at libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You can sign up for free. We send it out twice a week. And of course, your excellent program. I encourage people to, if they're not yet subscribed, if they haven't hit that like button, do that, because in the days ahead, you're going to have to find a way to get access to true, legitimate, and important information. You're going to be bombarded on all sides with fake news, with CNN propaganda. The algorithms will be rigged to make sure you can't even find the stuff that you want to find. And so get signed up now to publications that you know and trust, and that way you can continue to have access to the truth no matter what the masters of big tech think about it.
Well, Alex Newman, contributor at Epoch Times, The New American, and Liberty Sentinel, thank you so much for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you, sir.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 13th through August 19th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.